Well, I'll say good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for being on for our LeadVR session 4. Excited to have you participate in our session about opportunities and issues facing VR and getting into the discussions this morning or this afternoon about your homework reflections, your interviews that you've had with your potential mentors and your essay reflections. I've read through some of mine or all of the ones that I had, and really interested in hearing more and getting into the group discussions regarding those. This morning, just a reminder about our ground rules. We like to ask everyone to keep your camera on when you're in your small group discussion so that we can build our relationships with one another. But as far as the general session in the homeroom, there is not a need for you to have your cameras on. What else do you need to be reminded on? Any questions or anything that we have from participants today? I know there's one thing that I'm asking the faculty to review, and that is our June session date. And when you get into your breakout rooms, please discuss that. I've asked for consideration of moving that to June 29th rather than June 22nd. So if you have a problem, if that comes to be a big conflict with most participants, then we'll keep it on the 22nd. Right now, I do have a conflict that week and would ask if we can move it to the 29th, if it's not a conflict for everyone. In our home breakout rooms, we can discuss further if you have questions about the coaching sessions or accountability partner, homework, or anything like that, as well as your presentations. We've talked through all of those in general, and so I don't really know that I need to review anything. I will give you some potential dates though. We've talked a little bit about each session regarding doing those presentations. When you come through this session, we're going to talk about SWOT analysis, and then we'll spend the rest of LeadVR developing your recommendations that come out of that SWOT analysis. And what we ask you to do is optional, is to develop a presentation that you're going to present up to your chain of command about your recommendation that you gleaned out of that SWOT analysis. That presentation is optional. It's not a requirement. It wasn't originally built into LeadVR. We thought it would be a good experience for you though, and we want to be there to support you for that presentation. So I would say if you want to participate and go forward with doing those presentations, let us know the dates that you're going to do those. We prefer to have it sometime the week of July 19th or the 26th. July 19th or July 26th through the 29th. If you could schedule that presentation during that time, that would be optimal. We can set aside time on our calendars to participate, to support, and be there for you when you make that presentation. I think those were my big rocks that I was to cover this morning. Any questions or anything else that comes to mind? I think I've gotten everyone assigned to the breakout rooms. If I've misassigned you, please just let me know in some way and we'll get you to the right place. We have
what is it going to do us?
What's that? So we've shuffled our groups again today, just so you have an opportunity to be able to meet everyone in your cohort. Today, our groups are, let's see, I have Robin Freeman and Christy Lamas are together. Dr. Susan Flowers Benton and Veronica Jackson are together. And then John Connolly and David Leon are together. So you'll be meeting a different group today in your breakout room. So take a little time to get to know one another as you do your reflection. So in your breakout rooms, you're going to go through your homework, your essay, your findings, your big rocks, your big findings from that, as well as your interviews with your potential mentors. Any questions before we open up the rooms? All right, I'm going to open them up. You'll have, I think, 30 minutes to go through that. Is that right, John and Christy, what you've allotted for that? About 30 minutes?
Yeah, about 30 minutes.
That should be fine.
Okay, we're opening it up. Yeah, looks like I didn't assign some of you all. And let's see. William Marchett, who is your faculty? I'll find it.
Dave Leon.
Okay, I'm gonna get you over there. And then Megan.
I'm also with David.
Okay, thank you. And then Latasha is with Veronica.
Veronica. Okay.
Thank you.
I need to make sure that everyone can still see my screen.
We cannot, you'll have to share it again.
Okie dokie. Okay, I'm doing this right. How's that? Got it. All right, welcome back everybody from the homework discussion. I hope yours was as lively and just full of information as ours was. We really truly enjoyed that. So now we're going to get back to our overall topic for today. Mr. John Connolly with CSAVR and myself, we're going to go over with you major opportunities and some challenges in VR. These are our goals for today. We want to define and help you initiate what's called a SWOT analysis. SWOT, if you've heard of it before, is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to help you with your decision-making processes. We're going to discuss the challenges that we see and ask you to talk about some of yours. I know we've done that through some of the exercises that we've had in previous sessions in our small groups, but just to make sure that we're touching on everything that you would like to see us discuss. We're going to review some opportunities. What can we do to turn these challenges upside down? And then there was an ask in the overall development of LeadVR to focus on how to use and understand labor market information. So we are going to drill down on one type of site that anyone can use no matter what state you're in and talk about it. And then we're going to talk about business engagement activities. What are some best practices? There's an attached PDF that goes along with this PowerPoint that kind of digs into that a little bit more, and it gives you some links to some toolkits on business engagement from a technical assistance center that may help you guys. And last but never least, we're going to talk about performance measures. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Connolly.
Well, thank you, Christy, and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon. And I do hope we have a conversation. You know, certainly Christy and I don't have a corner on the market about any of this. So we'd we want to make this an interactive session. So please put your thoughts, questions, ideas, suggestions in the chat box. And we'll try to make sure that we monitor that. And, you know, again, really look forward to your participation. So why would you want to look at opportunities, threats? Why would you want to address those issues? Well, maybe it's Darwinism, but certainly an organization that wishes to survive has to identify new opportunities. And the environment is always changing. If you think back to January of 2020, who would have thought that 2 months later, agencies would be shifting to telework, virtual service delivery, scrambling to make sure if they didn't have them, their counselors had cell phones, had laptops that they could work from. So, you know, this is a constant thing that an organization has to do, that we all have to do. And, you know, for growth, you have to identify new opportunities, new areas where it can grow, new services that might be needed, whether it be by individuals with disabilities or businesses in terms of the work that we do, the business that we're in. And, you know, certainly sometimes you have to create those opportunities. It doesn't mean that they're always out there and you stumble over them. Sometimes you have to create opportunities. So you have to be aware what your stakeholders, your customers need. And sometimes you're thinking ahead even before they realize they need it by listening to them and hearing what they're saying, hearing what their challenges are. You can identify those opportunities. Thus, you know, sometimes we need to invent the opportunities, but the opportunities have to be responsive to some perceived need. So any thoughts or comments on this? All right, well, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box yet, but hoping we're going to be populating that as we go along. So we'll move to the next slide, please. All right, Christy mentioned the SWOT analysis. This is a tool to use to identify issues and opportunities. And the 4 key factors are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We're going to delve more in depth to each of these. So opportunities, potentially favorable external conditions for the agency. You know, example might be in your state because of COVID, tax revenues are down. So what's an opportunity that you could address? You know, working with businesses need workers now. Businesses are starting to open back up. So that's an opportunity by assisting, you know, customers to enter into competitive integrated employment. You can help with that tax base. Threats. So threats are potentially unfavorable external conditions, but threats can also come from inside the organization too. Not that anybody's trying to do harm, but you know, sometimes one part of the agency doesn't realize the impact that what they're going to do will have on another part of the agency. So you also have to be doing internal scans too in regards to strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Let's talk more about strengths, what the agency does very well internally. So strengths give you an opportunity to pursue things that are a good fit with your program strengths. You know, our program should be strong in assisting individuals with disabilities to obtain, retain, or advance in employment. You have the knowledge, the expertise, the experience of working with those individuals to achieve competitive integrated employment. So how do you use that strength? Also, when you think of threats, your strengths are the opportunity to identify ways that you can use those strengths to reduce the vulnerability of your organization or your team or teams to external and or internal threats. Going back to my earlier example, states have been hit hard during the pandemic. Businesses have been hit hard by the pandemic. Tax revenues are down. Businesses are now starting to look for workers, employees. So again, using the strength we have, you have, your teams have, in terms of your experience, knowledge, and expertise, you have an opportunity here to turn the threat, potentially maybe budget cuts to your agency because of those reduced state revenues, to overcome that threat by showing how your strengths can help the state deal with those diminished tax revenues and increase the tax base. So weaknesses, where functions are performed internally. So sometimes as you look at opportunities, you realize that to pursue that opportunity, to capitalize on the opportunity, you need to bring your strengths to the table, but also you need to see, do you have any weaknesses? Are there things you need to shore up in order to have the maximum ability to take advantage of that opportunity? So you also, at the same time you're looking at opportunities, have to look at your strengths, but also your weaknesses and address them. Weaknesses and threats. As you do that analysis, it's important that you establish a plan to prevent your programs, your teams' weaknesses from making it highly susceptible to external threats. Again, I would use that example of budget cuts. How do you make sure that your agency is seen by your state legislature, by their budget committees, as a strength in terms of creating that additional tax revenue, addressing that decrease in tax revenue? So we have a comment in the chat box. We're constantly having to advocate service needs for individuals with disabilities to our mandated partners. They often think it is easy to assist an individual with a disability without truly understanding the complex challenges they often experience. Hence the threat of lack of understanding. And that's a great point. WIOA requires that we work with the core partners. But if we don't understand what they do, they don't understand what we do, it's going to be difficult to establish a partnership, to establish collaborative atmosphere, and to best address the needs where we have mutual customers. So, that's one way to turn that threat into a strength, by building that understanding, building that partnership. So that's really a great comment. Thank you. So why don't we move to the next slide? All right, well, how do you get the information to do the SWOT analysis? You have to do an environmental scan. You have to consider demographics, the economy, the economics, how much things may cost in terms of bringing up a new service, expanding a service, for example. Political or regulatory, are there going to be political issues, whether small p or large p? Are there going to be stakeholders that are going to feel disenfranchised, not happy with what you're doing? Or where are the stakeholders who are going to be supportive of your efforts? Somebody in your state legislature, do you have champions there that are going to be supportive, or are they going to have issues? You know, for example, a lot of agencies are considering reducing their office footprints because of more virtual service delivery and telecommuting. Well, legislators may get a call from landlords who are unhappy that they're going to lose the state as a customer. So you have to consider those things. Socio-cultural, certainly right now, the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are in the forefront. I think in all aspects of our society, both at the local, state, and national level. So as you look at doing your environmental scan, you have to take that into account. Technology. You know, things such as we were talking about earlier. Do your counselors, you know, have the tools that they really need, especially if you're looking at virtual service delivery, telecommuting? Do they have personal cell phones? Do they have laptops? Do they know how to use it? Case management systems. Do you have a case management system that's user-friendly? Is it available when folks need to access information? Who can access the information? Does everybody in your organization who needs to get information, do they have access to it? And then global segments. I like this: pest, the political, economic, social, and technological, which is really a comprehensive term for all of the above that we've been talking about. So let's go to the next slide, please, Christy. All right. In doing an environmental scan, you certainly want to look at, going back to the previous slide, what environmental factors may have an impact on your agency in terms of that opportunity you're thinking about going for. Are there emerging trends that you need to be aware of that you have to address? Are there disruptive forces? You know, say for example, you feel you need to change your payment system to vendors to make it more efficient. Well, vendors may not like that because they're used to the current system. So unless you explain the why, unless you take into account their thoughts, feelings, unless you educate them about why it would be more beneficial to them, they may become a disruptive force. What are the opportunities and threats? And again, going back to the previous slides, what are going to be, I like challenges better than threats, but what are going to be the challenges or threats to what you're planning to do? Where are they going to come from? And how can you minimize or eliminate those challenges or threats? You know, for example, in Ohio, we used to have to go every 2 years to our state legislature to ask for the money we needed to match our federal allotment, and had to go before a House and a Senate budget committee. And one of the things we always found helpful was, in terms of eliminating threats or challenges to our budget request, is we met in advance with every member of each committee before we got to our actual budget hearing to explain to them what we were asking for, why we were asking for it, how we saw it would be beneficial to the citizens of Ohio and their constituents. And by the time we went through all those meetings, we at least knew where the challenges were going to come from at the budget hearing. In many instances, we addressed the challenges before we got to the budget hearing. So oftentimes, we really didn't have any challenges to our requests in the budget hearing because we had gotten all their questions answered up front. I think this next slide is very important. Feel free to incorporate your personal observations. You are out in the community, you talk to your staff. So it's important to add to that mix what you know, what you see, what you hear is happening. All right. So we're ready to go to the next group activity, Christy?
Yes, sir, I think so. I'm gonna just brief this for you guys. What we're doing is trying to help you work through a SWOT analysis and group discussion. So there are some guiding questions here for you to try to help identify what's the real need. Questions about cost. What do you need in your organization? So when you're going through each 6 of these areas, what you want to keep in mind is what are my strengths, my weaknesses, my opportunities and threats, according to what John has just gone over with you. There are lots of questions here, so keep in mind if some are more important to you than others, then those are the ones that you pick and discuss with your groups. We do have quite a bit of time set aside for this, 30 minutes. So let's break out into our groups and get started.
Okay, we're going to open up all the rooms.
Julie, absolutely.
I took some, but in case I missed anything, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Ms. Robin, it looks like everybody's back. So we're gonna get restarted. Welcome back, everyone. Man, enjoy that. And John and I apologize for the amount of words on this slide. It's a lot. So what we'll do is pare it down some. If you want to try to use this to lead some discussions with your own groups back in your own offices around where you are. We all have one main goal, getting people into jobs. So think about where you are, where you can improve. The SWOT analysis is a great tool. Help you organize your thoughts.
Hey, Christy, before you get back into your presentation, I had a question if we were taking a break or restroom break soon, or can you give us an idea?
Yeah, we absolutely can do that.
Yeah.
Yes, let's do it. 10 minutes?
Sounds good.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. All right. Welcome back, everyone. John and I hope that was not too painful for you. Before we get into the next section on challenges, we would like some feedback from you. How was that group discussion for you, or even how was the previous one? Just send us some comments in the chat. Okay, if I don't see a comment, I'm probably going to call on somebody. Let me see. Who's in our group? I want to hear somebody we haven't heard from. Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer said it's helpful to hear. It's helpful to hear from other states. We had an interesting discussion about MSGs. Thank you, Robin. Yes, very different depending on what state you're in. Andrea, you're new to SWOT. I'm glad it gave you a different perspective. And Julie likes the small group discussions. They're helpful to process the information. All right, and she's got some ideas on how to assess her agency in the state. So important to be aware of stakeholders. Yes. Who are your friends? We've been dealing with that since kindergarten, right? It's important. Anybody else? And then we'll get moving on. Ooh, Robin said it really brought out how the lack of awareness can be a threat. We had a lively discussion about just perceptions of different college trainings, different credentials, and perception is reality, right? So how do we deal with that? What are our opportunities to deal with that? We had a great discussion. So we're going to talk about some other challenges now. And let's see, just got to figure out, there we go. John and I are going to tag team this challenge, WIOA implementation. But first, we have some questions for you. Please enter in the chat. What are the challenges for your agency? Just briefly, I know we've been talking about it today. Has your agency begun to consider SWOT analysis, or have they already? The major concerns, and which ones would be your major concerns? Just pick one, top one. We'll give you a few minutes to put that into the chat. Timely reporting and accurate data. Thank you, Wheeler. Tim Brown, adapting to working with pre-ets. I completely understand. Anyone else? Ooh, yes. Jennifer Koski. Challenge for staff with the change. It's fatigue and dealing with so many documentation requirements. Yes. Miss Julie, some of the programs lack focus and funding. Yes. Miss Andrea, their agency struggles with understanding how to report and capture all the services they're providing through their case management system. Mr. Jim, having all the mandated partners to get together. Yes. So that we can plan and prepare and submit our combined and unified plans timely. We aren't sharing data with every agency. We're supposed to do that, and some of us are still struggling. That's a very real threat, and that's probably should be higher on our priority list. Jamie Towns says talent acquisition and turnover. You guys have some really timely and important challenges that you've mentioned here. So these are some of the ones that, that John and I brought up in our discussions. John, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Christy.
Thank you, sir.
So we're going to split this slide. And one of the first challenges I think that came up with WIOA was competitive integrated employment. What does that mean? And I think the most challenging part has been integrated. Does a particular job opportunity meet the definition of integration? And when we look at Ability One programs, many of their jobs aren't integrated, but some of their jobs are integrated. And how do you determine whether a job, for example, with an Ability One contract is integrated or not? Another issue has been choice. Some providers say, well, if my job is not integrated, you're denying your customer choice. Well, the customer can still choose to pursue that job. It's just that they won't have the support from VR. Another issue has been, well, a lot of these jobs pay well, but they may not be integrated. Isn't pay more important than integration? I know a number of agencies have developed checklists that counselors can use to determine whether they think a job meets the definition of CIE, especially integration. So I'm wondering, are you seeing this as a challenge in your agencies or for your counselors that report to you? And if you have a comment on it, please put it in the chat box. So Christy, you want to talk about PREETs?
Yes, sir. I saw in the chat earlier, I think it was Mr. Tim, wrote that PREETs is a challenge. There's so many different avenues that we can take with PREETs. What we found here in Arkansas is it's a challenge with liability for providers and for employers. They want to make sure the students are safe. They want to make sure that we are safe. They're not in a true employment situation. So that causes issues. We also have the difference between providing services on campus, on a high school campus, and off a high school campus, and the challenges to get students to a program where they may or may not have transportation. Most of the time, it's a may not. So we're trying to do things in conjunction with our IDEA partners at the school, but they're not rolled into WIOA. So that causes an additional challenge because some of the ask in their act and some of the ask in our act are the same. So who's supposed to do what when? That's a huge challenge. So that, I don't know about your state, but in our state, we end up having to do individual agreements with each individual local school district. There's 75 counties in Arkansas and hundreds of schools. That's a lot of work with the same amount of money or less and the same amount of people. Challenges all around. I think we have challenges in the dual customer approach. I love that concept. I think it's amazing that we are deciding, hey, we need to look at what it is that the business needs in order for us to find placements. But it doesn't quite match our VR timeframe and our VR processes. So if a business picks up the phone and says, hey, Arkansas Rehab Services, we need to fill 20 positions by the end of next week. Get me some bodies. Well, then we're going back and going, where am I with eligibility? Who has plans that say they want to do this job? And I'm on the phone. Lots and lots of trouble in trying to match up the needs of one to the needs of the federal requirements of our whole VR process. And the last one I'm going to touch on is common measures. The philosophy behind common measures is that every WIOA partner is being looked at equitably across 6 different areas. And in order for us to do that, we need to make sure that timelines, getting responses from clients, that we have supporting documentation, that all this information coincides and can be entered into a case management system that is going to capture the data correctly without hundreds of errors so that it can be reported every 3 months. That's a challenge.
All right, well, thanks, Christy. I think of the remaining boxes on the slide, and I know Kim mentioned in the chat box that in her agency, the Ability One opportunities go to the director who decides if they meet CIE. Jim noted that RSA has published a frequently asked question in March on CIE, and it is available on the RSA website. So thank you. So in addition to pre-ETS and CIE and the dual customer and common performance measures, there were other new requirements in WIOA. 14C added a lot of administrative burden to the work of the agencies. Also, a lot of folks were feeling that, you know, their son or daughter should have that choice, or they should have that choice without having to hear about VR and the potential benefits of VR. A lot of new MOUs were required, the need to build new partnerships. And also, I think pre-ETS brought out or put more focus on the fact that there really is a disconnect right now between IDEA and VR, and especially what VR has to do in pre-ETS, with some schools and school systems saying, hey, you know, pre-ETS is your responsibility. IDEA doesn't address pre-ETS. You need to deal with it. Fortunately, in a lot of areas, that has been overcome because VR and the schools have built partnerships, seeing the need to cooperate to best serve the students. But I think all this comes back to reauthorization. The Rehabilitation Act is up for reauthorization. Congress has already started to have internal discussions about reauthorization. I know CSA VR has been reaching out to our members, your directors, asking what they think would be the top issues or needs that we want to propose to Congress that they address in reauthorization. Some of the things have been potentially extending the carryover period from 1 year to 3 years. In terms of pre-ETS, looking at making sure that students get the support services they may need to participate in a required service and have that be payable out of the pre-ETS set aside, rather than having to say, okay, you're going to have to apply for VR services and have an open case before we can get you that service or services that you need to participate in a required service. Another has been making it easier for agencies to provide the authorized services in addition to the required services. So those are some of, I think the challenges that WIOA has presented, but also with reauthorization, the opportunity to address a lot of these challenges working with Congress. So if you see some other challenges from WIO implementation that you're working to address, or you've seen in your agencies, if you want to note those in the chat box, that would be great. So pass it back to you, Christy.
Yes, sir. Okay. All right. We're going to talk about the pandemic next. Did I go too fast?
Yeah, we are going to talk about the pandemic.
Do you want to move to the next slide, or are we good here?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box, so why don't we move to the next slide?
Okay. So we have a question for you. What is your agency's pandemic issue or issues?
Andrea wrote in the chat box that one of the challenges they see in WEO is meeting the closure goals, those common performance measure requirements, which we're going to talk about. Another challenge Megan notes is outreach. So want to talk a little bit about the challenges that the pandemic and post-pandemic have presented. And here are some of those that Christy and I identified, and certainly please put in the chat box other ones that you see. The one was the move to virtual service delivery. Again, in March of 2020, I think a lot of agencies and a lot of businesses in general were caught flat-footed because they had to switch from face-to-face service delivery to virtual service delivery. They weren't prepared to do that. Again, as was mentioned earlier, in some agencies, counselors didn't have their own cell phones, they didn't have laptops, they didn't have policies around telecommuting and virtual service delivery. As noted on this slide, they didn't have social distancing practices. There were issues of accommodation requests in the pandemic, not only from customers and also from staff. I mean, I think we were all concerned, fearful, and we were wondering what's safe and what's not safe. Is it safe to go to meet a consumer, and where can we meet? Or, should I just stay in place and do my best using my computer and phone? Agencies have had to adopt new policies for the new environment. Again, a lot of agencies had no experience with telecommuting. A lot of state governments frowned on telecommuting. And so the agencies had to come up with new policies. So employees knew the parameters. You as supervisors and managers knew what was expected of you. And also, how did you keep in touch? How do you keep in touch with your peers? How do you keep in touch with the people who report to you and are part of your team? And how does the agency in general keep in touch with not only employees, but also vendors, other stakeholders, customers, businesses, individuals with disabilities? We're thinking that there's going to be an expected increase in service demand. You probably started to maybe already see that now that a lot of people have gotten their first shot and or second shot. Things are starting to open up a little bit. In some states, they've been more open than others. So we think businesses are going to be coming to ask for, as Christy was mentioned earlier, we need your help. We need your help with filling the vacancies that we have. Another issue that we think is out there is that we don't know what the long-term effects of COVID are going to be. We've heard about the long haulers, people who have been impacted by COVID beyond just the initial symptoms. Are those people going to have to deal with after effects that impact their ability to do their job. And our business is going to be coming to VR agencies saying, hey, I need your help. I need you to work with this valuable employee so I can help this person maintain their employment. State budget challenges. We've talked about this a little earlier in the presentation. You know, there is concern because businesses were shutting down, that tax revenues went down because people weren't working. So what's going to be the impact on state economies? Are they going to have to say, hey, you know, VR or another agency, we don't think we can give you all the money you need to match your federal allotment because we don't have the money. The inability to spend all VR and pre-EDS dollars. You all probably know a lot more about this than me, but you know, a lot of people didn't want to leave their homes. They didn't want to go out to participate in training programs. They didn't want to do job exploration and so forth. And you know, one of the questions early on for a lot of agencies, well, what do we do with these cases? Do we close the cases? Do we keep the cases open until we see how this works out? But the bottom line, a lot of money was not spent because there wasn't the demand. Now we're starting to see an uptick in that demand in a lot of agencies. But the question is that those dollars were time limited. For VR dollars, once you match those dollars in a year, if you haven't spent them all by the end of the year, you can carry them over for another year. Well, a lot of agencies are saying, well, even with those 2-year opportunities, that's not enough time right now under the impact of COVID. We need at least a 3rd year. So as I mentioned earlier, that's an issue with reauthorization. That would be something that Congress would have to extend. The Secretary of Education does not have that power. And somebody did mention in the chat box the maintenance of effort challenges. If you're not familiar with MO, maintenance of effort, MOE, the requirement is that a state, so if you have a blind and a general agency, it's the money spent by both agencies, but a state has to spend the same amount in non-federal dollars 2 years down the road that they did 2 years prior. So again, because of the pandemic, a lot of agencies weren't able to meet this requirement because they weren't spending the dollars. Now, the Secretary of Education does have the authority, the legal authority, to grant a waiver, but it's only on an individual state-by-state basis. There are certain requirements, and a lot of states are saying, look, don't you know there was a pandemic? This was a national event. Why should we as states have to individually go through all this individual filing? Why can't you just give us a broad general waiver? So that's another issue. But I think you can see in a lot of these things, just like we were talking about earlier, a lot of these challenges have become opportunities. Virtual service delivery, I think that's become an opportunity to reach out to more folks, more efficiently deliver some services, reduce the cost of services so that there are more dollars to serve more individuals. Telecommuting, you know, I think it gives staff more flexibility. It's not for everybody, but again, it's an opportunity for a lot of folks, in addition to a challenge sometimes for the agencies. So I know we had a lot of activity in the chat box. Well, some of the comments there too were schools having difficulty keeping track of students, let alone making referrals to VR. The issue of virtual services only being available to consumers who had the technology to participate, but also knew how to use the technology. The fact that referrals are down. So those are some additional challenges: maintaining contacts with students, spending the $110, which we've touched on. So do you want to go to the next slide, Christy?
Yes, sir. So here's some potential state challenges. Kind of like what we did in our group assignment. What we try to do is figure out where we are, what's our SWOT on each one of these. There are possible funding cuts, maintenance of effort issues that John mentioned previously. If we don't have the money from the state in order to meet the federal match, then our overall budget will be reduced. That's problematic. Are we hoping for flexibilities on that based on a global pandemic? Absolutely. Do we have a responsibility and an opportunity to explain how these challenges could impact us into the future and how they could impact our state as a whole? We do. So for each one of these, working with your teams, trying to decide, you know, where can we go with these issues and how do we want to handle them using a SWOT? Recruitment and retention, absolutely problematic. People were working from home. People are still working from home. That's not always conducive to happy environment, good environment, productive environment. People leave, not just because of the pandemic, but just overall other opportunities. We know that core accreditation has happened across the country with our CRC programs. It's all the classes that counselors take to become a CRC is directly aligned with the LPC. The only difference at the end is what tests they take. And I'll tell you now, if I were going through college now, I would think long and hard about my opportunities and which one of those outcomes would give me the best potential for my family. And that's what people are doing now. So trying to get people more attracted to the VR program, given that salaries is a huge part of that, and looking at funding cuts. So how do we want to address those issues? Not just locally and within our the counselors and the managers that we oversee, but on a bigger scale, so that the real impact is known for our state and for our nation. I don't want us to ever have to go in order of selection. If we go in order of selection, we serve less people. If we serve less people, we have less outcomes. And it's just this whole loop that goes around. So as much as we can continue to serve, that's what we want. But it's a challenge. If you don't have the money to do it, that's like our #1 remedy, right? You start closing categories. I don't know. I don't know that is the best practice if our overall goal is to put people to work. So try to help curtail that as much as possible. We have a challenge in keeping policy updated. Yesterday, I read that the 1903 that was updated in July of 2020 has been re-updated. It was 4 or 5, it was either 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly. More times there were let me explain what this really means. Since July of 2020. That's really hard for case management systems to readapt. That's really hard for counselors and state agencies to be able to keep up. with everything that's going on. We need to provide necessary training and equipment to our staff so that they can do their jobs, so that recruitment and retention problem from the beginning doesn't have a larger impact. Businesses, we're gonna have a whole section on business engagement, because if we're meeting the business's needs, then we're meeting our needs as well. And it just makes good sense. But sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, it's not always easy to meet it within their timeframes. Creating careers and not just a job. In our breakout session, we talked about a grant program called the Career Pathways Initiative. The whole point of that is to make sure that we're focused on in-demand careers for people so that they can continue to move up. That should be our goal. And it is a challenge because of longevity, because of money, because of time.
All right, thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did want to mention, again, in keeping with this theme of opportunities and challenges presenting opportunities. You know, in the last slide, Christy was talking about the potential budget cuts and the possibility of an agency having to go into an active order of selection. But you can also turn that into an opportunity, because if you're before your state legislature at budget time, if you can show the impact of on their constituents, how many people might not get services if your agency goes into an active order of selection? The decrease in state income tax that your state will suffer because you're serving less people are going into employment. So, you know, again, I think we always have to look at challenges through two different lenses, the challenge, but also the lens of how do we make that an opportunity. So some more potential state challenges, or VR challenges, I guess, in looking at the national level. There are 78 VR agencies in the states, the territories, and the District of Columbia right now. And in the last 7 years, there have been 76 changes in directors. So it's almost been 100% turnover in the directors of VR agencies. I started in VR back in the 1980, and there were a lot of what I'll call lifers. You know, directors served in their positions for 15, 17 years, or maybe more. They were power brokers in their own states. I remember a gentleman by the name of Joe Duesenberry from South Carolina. He has a building named after him in South Carolina on the VR campus. Also, leaders came from inside the agencies. So they knew VR, they understood their agency, they knew the agency, they knew the people. Had a pretty good idea about the law and the regulations. And now more and more leaders are coming from outside their agency. More and more directors are coming from political appointees. Not that that's bad. Oftentimes it's good because they have new perspectives. And at the same time, they also have to learn the VR system. They have to learn the law and regulations. So additional challenges. So Christy, I think I'm turning this one back to you at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. A lot of our states are looking for new case management systems now. We've had them for a while, some of us decades, and their ability to adapt to new ways of doing work, like having a mobile app, or being able to absorb all the new changes with data collection for the 9/11, just unable to really keep up. So now we're having to go out and shop around and look for new case management systems, and that takes time. You have to put out requests for proposals. That whole process could last up to 1.5 years in some cases, but it's needed and it is a challenge. We've got certain duties within VR that a rehab counselor has to do and no one else. And we know that eligibility and plan, they have to be done by the counselor. But as things progress and we move forward, counselors get larger caseloads. It's really hard for them to keep up with all the asks that are coming their way. So just being able to keep that balance and making sure that we have internal controls that prevent anyone else from trying to help. You know, it's help, but not really helping in the way that we're supposed to.
So just want to go back to the middle of the slide to maintaining organizational structure. Maybe you saw this in your state, but as the pandemic hit and again, there was a drop off in referrals or persons who were on caseload seeking services. At the same time, states had a huge influx of unemployment claims. And a lot of states said to VR agencies, well, hey, your counselors aren't doing anything. Why? We're going to move them over here to process claims. So that was an organizational structure challenge. Another challenge has been sometimes that when you look at core programs under WIOA, VR has the most money on the block. And sometimes when states are dealing with budget issues, they're saying, well, why can't we take VR money and move it over here?
Yeah.
Or, hey, you guys have a great VR director. She is doing a wonderful job. We're having some problems over here in the Medicaid program or wherever. Why don't they take on that program in addition to VR? So some of the things that are in the act are the requirement that a VR agency has to have a full-time director who's responsible for the day-to-day operation of the program. The staff of the agency, the VR agency, have to work all their time or substantially all their time that they're employed full-time on VR service delivery. And also that the VR director has the sole authority to and responsibility to expend VR funds. Now, why is that important? Well, some VR agencies, and it's becoming more prevalent, are under an umbrella. And the VR director may not have a fiscal person, they may not have an IT person, because all that's done at the umbrella level. But with these requirements in the act, the VR director is better able to make the case that legally, even though the fiscal is handled at the umbrella level, they need to have control over the VR finances. They need to have that person who's working on those working closely with them. And it's the VR director, not the umbrella director, that needs to make those decisions and have the responsibility about how the VR funds are used. So Christy, I'll turn it back to you.
Hey. Oh, we have a break. I think we took our break a little bit early. So if you guys are okay with it, we're gonna power through.
Okay.
Okay. The next section is meeting challenges and opportunities. It's a little more in depth on this topic. Here's some information resources that we pulled up. John's going to cover some of these. I'm going to cover some of them. And we're just want to point you in a direction of where you can find some information to take those challenges and turn them into ways that strategies that you can use to help improve your programs and processes.
So thanks, Christy. So I'm going to cover the 107 monitoring reports, exit interview findings, and fiscal reports. I don't know how many of you are familiar with 107 monitoring, or if you participated in a monitoring review by the Rehabilitation Services Administration of your agency. If you have, just please note that in the chat box, and maybe you could comment on your experience. But under the Act, the Rehabilitation Services Administration has the responsibility to monitor agencies as to their performance and compliance with the Act and regulations. And every year, RSA selects X number of agencies to go through this process. Up until about 2 years ago, the monitorings were done with on-site visits that usually lasted a week, with RSA teams coming out to your state to talk to administration, counselors, fiscal staff, state rehabilitation council members, vendors, and so forth, to get information to help them determine if your agency was in compliance, or if there were places where the agency wasn't and then had to be put on a performance improvement plan. 2 years ago, they went to a hybrid model where some agencies were being monitored through offsite, and this year, all the agencies, of which there are 6, are going through offsite monitoring. I'm seeing in the chat box, we have a couple of people who have been involved in monitoring. Delaware Blind just received their draft report. Arkansas Blind had virtual monitoring, and they just responded to their draft report. So in this process, RSA issues something called Monitoring Technical Assistance Guide, or MTAG, which indicates these are the areas and questions we're going to ask your agency as part of this process to determine if you're in compliance or not. It's really a good place to start if your agency is going to be monitored, to prepare for that, for the monitoring. And also, it's a good opportunity to do some self-checking about the state of your agency and its compliance with the Act and regulations. But the process is that once RSA completes their review, they issue a draft report. Agencies now have 15 working days to respond to the report, and then RSA will issue a final report indicating if they had any findings and if there are places where the agency was out of compliance and has to be put on a performance improvement plan. Those reports are available on the RSA website. The 2020 reports are just coming out. As a person from Delaware Blind mentioned, their report was just published as final. But in the process, once RSA completes their review, there's an opportunity for agencies to have an exit conference before RSA goes back to write that draft report. that is a great opportunity to hear what RSA may feel are shortcomings, but also to clear up any misunderstandings on their part, clarify issues that they may have misunderstood. So it's an opportunity to eliminate a lot of potential findings that could come out in that draft report. Fiscal reports. I think, it's very important to know spending, know your budget, and authorized and vouchered. I know every year when we got to the fourth quarter, I'd have people calling me as a director saying, "You're out of money. I'm not getting any business at my CRP. I'm going to have to lay off people because I don't have deep pockets. I depend on a steady flow of business from your agency." And it's like, so when I looked at things, yeah, we didn't have money to spend because a lot of our money at that point was tied up in authorizations. However, once we looked at a lot of those authorizations, they either needed to be canceled because the service wasn't going to be provided, or they needed to be corrected because maybe the authorization was for 5 services, but only 3 were ultimately provided. So we weren't out of money, but we couldn't authorize additional services because it was tied up, the money was tied up. So I think it's important to look at those authorizations and vouchers, make sure the staff understand the importance of keeping up with cancellations and corrections, making sure too that vendors also file or bill you in a timely manner. Another problem we also found sometimes too was the authorization was still pending because the vendor hadn't billed us yet. They provided the service, but they hadn't billed us yet. So we couldn't close out the authorization. So those are things to keep in mind, but also I think you can see the impact on the bigger picture, because also when I get those calls about, well, you're out of money, you're not paying us, invariably, I would have a state legislator call me and say, what are you doing? Why aren't you paying my constituents? They're providing services. What's the matter with you? Can't you manage your money? And, I had to patiently explain that. So you don't want to get those calls. You don't want your director to get those calls. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy to talk about more of the blocks on this slide.
Thank you, John. So the very first block that we have says state plan. I don't know about you guys, but as a new counselor, I didn't even know that there was such thing as a state plan or what was even in it. Now, so as I stayed in VR for a while, I learned what a valuable tool it really could be, especially if we drill it all the way down to our counselors, because inevitably the counselors are the ones and the managers are the ones who really know how the job is getting done on a day-to-day basis. Where the rubber meets the road is where people enter into employment. So how do we do that best? We do that best by developing goals and strategies that center around some realistic plans. So using this information, I think, is an opportunity to see how creative and how innovative your staff can be on some changes they might want to see to business as usual. So number one, you can meet your overall common measures goals. You can satisfy what the business's needs are. And you're really working in conjunction with what we said we're going to do and how we're going to do it. If there are particular strategies that go outside of the norm of the common measures that your state wants to see because it was part of that combined plan, then who do we need to talk to? How do we connect? so that we're all working in unison. I do think that state plan is really a valuable tool. For us, we were able to create a group orientation process for people that are duly enrolled with some of the WIOA partners, where that people come in and they really understand what VR is about and what it is not about. And also the mission of our partner agencies and how we can all connect to get them to where the road that they really want to go. This does a couple of things. It keeps the people coming in the mindset of, hey, employment is where I want to be. And if not, then they get referred to the agency that will best meet their needs. It keeps our percentages from being weighed down by folks who never really had employment as their outcome in the first place. Another thing we were able to do with this is create a satisfaction survey around plan time. So at plan, we're asking our clients, hey, or participants, hey, is this the type of goal that you really envisioned? Is this the type of money you want to make? Do you really feel there's an opportunity for you here? We have a whole satisfaction survey just around plan development, not just at closure. And it also gives us an added opportunity to reiterate what we're going to need from them long after their case is closed, because we know one of our challenges is trying to collect that data at post-exit once they leave the system. So something related to that, I sent a link out, and I think Robin sent it out to everybody. It's just an example of something that we did here. It's automated. They can click on it, fill it out to give us some post-exit information. You know, lots of our states have data sharing agreements with UI, so you can get those wages automatically. But sometimes people aren't in that UI system because they're either working for the federal government, or they're working for themselves, or they get a 1099, they're contract worker. So this is an additional way to ensure that you're collecting those common measures that you need. And I think it all ties back to what's your strategy, what's your goal, what's in your state plan, who's helping you inform it, and how are you having those discussions to build people into going into employment, overall goal. Another tool that we use to get us there is fiscal audits. RSA audits us with the MTAG, the state audits us based on what they think we should have paid for or not, and then what they think how we've done with meeting our 15% goals. So how that helps us for pre-eds, how that helps us is it lets us know what they're seeing from an outside perspective, where we might need to have more clarity in our policies and our procedures. So we do something called a policy directive. It's an opportunity just to drill down to staff, hey, you may have thought this meant one thing, but fiscal audit's finding something else. And let's make sure everyone understands what's happening. And it also may be an opportunity where we say, this policy or this procedure isn't quite cutting it, and we're going to have to revise it and repromulgate it. Having all that information lets you know what other outside agencies are seeing and how it affects our overall dollars and our budget. I think it's an opportunity for growth to get better. Did we hit all of our tiles? I think we did.
Yeah, we did. I just wanted to know Jim's comment in the chat box about making sure that you involve your state rehabilitation council in their committees.
And developing our state plan. Yeah, absolutely. And they also have valuable input as to, the opposite side of the coin, right? What's the consumer saying and how are they experiencing us? Looking at our statewide needs assessment, we don't have that on there. But that's very valuable. And knowing what stakeholders and what individuals, you don't have to just canvas people that are involved in VR. You can canvas people that may be potentially involved in VR. Schools that you work with, high school teachers that you work with. If we want to truly build a community that supports one another across IDEA, across WIOA, well, we need to ask the questions, and we need to do it formally and officially where we're addressing it. So thank you, Jim. Thank you for that. All right. Here's some more information sources. Sub-regulations in the Rehab Act and its regulations, and the RSA sub-regulatory guidance. This is on RSA's website, and I love the sub-regulatory guidance, and I love RSA's website because they've updated it. I was telling our group earlier that they've included sections for training around all the new WIOA tools, and who better than to get it from than the people who create it and monitor it. They also have added searchable engines, because they have a ton of information in addition to the Rehab Act that does just what I talked about. It drills down and clarifies what Congress really meant in the words that they wrote for WIOA. So technical assistance, something they call tax, information memorandums, policy directives, all of those things can be found. And I want to say their website is rsa.ed.gov. I have access to something that may not be what everybody has access to. So I just want to make sure I'm not giving you something bad. Okay. I think I have in here professional journals. As time goes on, I realize that there are more and more professional journals just dedicated to vocational rehab that are connected to universities that I didn't know existed before. So if you want to know about pre-employment transition, the University of North Carolina is now the pre-ex guru of everything. They have information there. There's information through the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. They have a journal that they maintain there as well. The University of Massachusetts at Boston, am I saying that right? UMass Boston. UMass Boston also puts out journals, and they have a ton of toolkits around VR. It is a wealth of great information to help you see what the research has been, what the best practices are, and what all of our constituents around the country are doing. The technical assistance websites. Last month in the presentation, I gave you those 3 TA websites. I'm interested if anyone has gone to any of those since we last spoke. Let me see if anybody's putting something in the chat. So 3 new ones, and I think that each one of them has their special parts. It's in that PDF that I sent so that you can have the direct links. I don't think I had quite enough space on our slide here to add all of it. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to you, John.
Thanks, Christy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the NCRTM, the National Clearinghouse on Rehabilitation Training Materials. This is a resource that's funded by RSA, and it is a clearinghouse, so the C in NCRTM, of training materials that have been developed by VR agencies, by the technical assistance centers, and it's a public website. You can go to the NCRTM. They have a search system, an indexing system. So I know sometimes you're working to find training materials that could help one of your staff. So this might be a resource that you want to take a look at. CSAVR, the Council of State Administrators for Vocational Rehabilitation, whom I work for, and the NCSAB, the National Council of State Agencies for the Blind. You have conferences. There's usually a spring conference and a fall conference. The spring conference is usually in DC, and the fall conference, and people from the West Coast have to travel to the East Coast in the spring, is usually somewhere west of the Mississippi, but not always, not always. Also, CSAVR's director or CEO sends out a weekly newsletter to all the directors, and it has information about what's going on at the national level in Congress concerning things, bills that may have impact on VR agencies, the VR program. There's information about new directors or changes in directors. There's also information about issuances from the Rehabilitation Services Administration, new products. Also, there's information about webinars that are upcoming, conferences, reports, and how you can register or access those materials. So that's another great source to many times find free training opportunities, and also lists programs or toolkits that the technical assistance centers that Christy was talking about have underway or are planning or have issued. Also with CSAVR, we have a monthly membership call. It's the first Wednesday of every month from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And we usually have a presentation of 15 to 20 minutes about a new strategy from a VR agency or VR agencies. So that's another opportunity to get information. The CSAVR National Employment Team, the NET, my colleague Kathy West Evans is the CSAVR liaison and leader of the National Employment Team, the NET. And every agency has a NET point of contact. And the purpose of the team is to work with businesses, especially on a national level or regional level, to inform them of the opportunities for hiring from VR agencies, but also services that VR agencies can help them with onboarding, maintaining staff, reasonable accommodations, etc. So in each of your agencies, you should have at least a contact, a person who's is a member of the NET, responsible for working within your agency in terms of business outreach, business marketing, and a resource, especially if your counselors are responsible for placement in liaisoning with businesses. This person can be a resource to them too. What haven't we talked about, Christy?
The only other thing that I'd like to mention is if you're doing internal quality assurance and just looking at those reports that your QA managers show, that's a great opportunity to know where training needs to be and where we might be focused on one item instead of maybe the more important ones, like strategies to help people get into employment. I think that there's a hierarchy of issues, and if you take those QA reports and you sort it based on, okay, what's the most urgent, most important thing that's going to help people get into employment, all the way down to, yeah, we want to do that, it's a best practice, but it's really not the most urgent issue that's going to cause people to make it or break it in training or in employment. I think we have a tendency to put the same level of priority on everything, and there are so many everythings that counselors get overwhelmed. I have to be perfect on 1 through 30 of this quality assurance report. Oh my goodness. Maybe weighting them and letting them know these are your big blocks. Anybody do Stephen Covey? Your big rocks, the ones that you absolutely need to look at first, all the way down to things that may have lesser weight, should carry lesser weight, and least importance. I see something in the chat asking John if he can talk about how participants in this group can sign up for the monthly calls.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. And I know Robin and Susan mentioned Project E3, which was one of the technical assistance centers that RSA funded in the last round. And as to the monthly calls and that weekly newsletter that I mentioned, the weekly newsletter goes to the CSA VR membership, which are those 78 directors of the VR agencies. Different directors route that in different ways in their agencies. So if you're interested in that, if you're not getting it, you may want to check with your director's office. It's really the same with the monthly calls. A lot of times in different agencies, there'll be multiple folks listening to the call in an office. So I would work through your director's office on those. I did want to mention also the WinTAC, which was funded in the last round. Their grant came to an end, but their website is still up, and they have a wealth of information regarding PREETs, Section 511, customized employment and supported employment. And if you just Google WinTAC, WINTAC.org, you can go there and find that information. And I see it's been put in the chat box. So thanks, Christy.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's see. Moving right along. We wanted to let you know that here's some opportunities and the case service reports that you receive to improve and take a look at what areas you have strengths in and where are your areas of need. There's the aged reports per service, those will come through your case management systems. Most of them you can tell how long someone's been in a certain status, and then how long it's been since they moved to the next level. That's a great tool for managers so they can have conversations with their counselors about what needs to happen next. There's a quarterly report now for the 9/11 instead of just a once a year report. Megan Lamb, who's in the training today, is very familiar with the quarterly 9/11 report, and others of you may be as well. This information will let you know where your agency stands on all of the various common measures. So they're collected. All the information that your counselors put in is collected in the system. You can take a look at it, see where things stand. We were talking about measurable skills gains earlier and what different states, what their negotiated rates look like. So where are we in a particular quarter on that report for measurable skills gains? I think most, if not all states have a negotiated rate, at least for that one common measure right now. So you need to know where your people stand. If you're in a large district, if you're covering a region or the entire state, and you can follow that all the way up to your end of year reporting, which is called the 9169. And what I wanted to do was show you guys what that looks like. I don't think I'm going to do that, just in the interest of time. But what it does, and you can see these on RSA's website, by the way, for program year 2019, all of our 9169 reports from last year are now published. All you got to do is click on your state's name and it'll pop up, or you can look at other states. I was telling him in our group that I took a look at Florida because I wanted to see what a larger state in the South, what their stats and number of individuals being served look like compared to a smaller state like Arkansas. And it also gives you an idea, if you compare what your state's doing to others, how are you doing? How do things stack up, and where might we have opportunities to serve people in those? There's barrier areas that all WIOA partners have to look at. For instance, one of the barriers is, do they have English as a second language, or are they on TANF, temporary aid for needy families? Florida's doing a heck of a lot better in those areas and capturing those types of clients than Arkansas is. So I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call somebody and I'm going to start asking questions. How are you doing that? What did you do? What do your agreements look like? And if you aren't the person that's authorized to make that call, then what you do is what Jim Swanson said in our small group, manage up. Give some recommendations, put it up the chain. Hey, I noticed this. Would it be in our best interest if we did a call to Florida to find out how they manage this? Because that can help us. I think one of our biggest opportunities when it comes to not losing any money at the end of the year, when we have all of our negotiated rates in, the more barriers people have, the individuals that we serve, the more grace RSA is going to give us on whether or not we met our, and I'm just going to put it out there, in Arkansas, we have to meet 24% for an MSG rate. So of all the people that are in some type of training or skills progression program, at least 24% of them have to be working towards the goal successfully. In other states, I hope you don't mind, Virginia, I'm going to call your name, in Minnesota, their rates are 32% and 32% respectively. So David, you're okay with that? But
Yeah.
32% for a state like Virginia means a heck of a lot more than 32% for a state like Arkansas, because we have less population. So just understanding those differences, what they're using to get to where they're going, I think it's an interesting read. Check it out on RSA's website, that dashboard that I'm talking about in the next tile. Every quarter, when they get the information that we send to them, they give us this pretty chart, and it'll show us where we are in pre-ets, where we are in number of people served, what types of services we're providing. It does almost everything short of giving us where we are in all the common measures. Does MSG, I think there's a move to try to give us where we are with median wages. David and John, you'll help me out. What am I missing on that RSA dashboard report? I think that about covers it.
Yeah, I think you've covered it well. I'm kind of curious, does anybody on the call refer to that, or do you get to see that in your agency?
It'll go to the state director. So if it, depending on your state director's protocols or commissioner, how they share that out. If they don't, you can always access RSA's website and get at least the 9169 reports. They are going to publish those dashboards as well. Last time I checked, I didn't see them on there yet, but I know that there's a placeholder for it. So it's coming. If you've got a case management system known as Aware or Libra, or I think there's still one state using Visas. What other case management systems do we have out there? Homegrown ones? Does anybody have a case management system that's not Aware, Libra, Visas? Maybe something outside of that? David Leon said that several states use homegrown systems. Yeah, I think Texas definitely has their own system.
Minnesota apparently has homegrown.
Okay, Wisconsin has homegrown. Workforce, is that yours, Jennifer?
Yep, we have Workforce One.
Okay, so all these different case management systems, what we hope to see is the ability for you to ask it different questions so you can pull some data. Oh, Florida has something called RIMS, and they're going to move to Aware. Yeah. Aware is great at pulling reports and doing different queries. So is a system that we currently have at ARS. It's called Libra. There's dozens and dozens of ways you can pull data. And if you do that, you get a better idea of who's being served, what they're being served in, when, how much money you're spending. All of these things are opportunities to inform what you're going to do next and how you're going to put people to work, what's working, what isn't working. I was very shocked to see in Arkansas, we spend several $1 million on college tuition, but our MSG rate was set at 24%. So with 1/3 of our budget being spent on college, but our rates only set at 24%, is it close? Yes. Do I think that we could do better? Yes. Do I think that we're going to make our rate? It just depends. It depends on what those trends are, what I see, what we all see in our case management system and what's happened with the pandemic. All right, we are going to move on to personal opportunities. And Mr. Connolly.
Thanks, Christy. Well, I think as we talked in the small groups today, and hopefully through this presentation, hearing a lot about challenges, and also more importantly, how to turn those into opportunities. Christy talked about, and if you have an idea, share it. We've talked about the different data sources and reports that you get, budget reports, the 9/11 report, the age of case report, the report on authorizations and vouchering. So how do you use that data to lead and manage and help your direct reports improve and grow? Being clear on the metrics and expectations. I know a lot of people have said, well, I feel challenged sometimes when I, have to address a person because there's a performance problem. Well, that becomes much, much harder if you haven't been clear as to what the expectations of your direct reports are. What are you expecting them to perform in, and also the why. So share the why. Why is it important that they do that? Evaluating performance and communication. Again, we talked about information sources that you have, those reports that Christy was just talking about, but also you have exit interviews that your HR department may conduct that can give you information about leadership and performance. You have satisfaction surveys. So use that information to evaluate where there are growth opportunities, where there's room for performance improvement. Know your budget and keep your staff, vendors, and stakeholders in the loop. It's important that folks don't get surprised. Your staff needs to know where you are with budget. Vendors need to know where you are with budget. Your partners need to know where you are with budget. If you think your agency is going to be in for a budget cut, which is a challenge, informing folks so they can prepare, but also more importantly, what can you do to stave off that budget cut, turn it into an opportunity so that there's not a cut, by enlisting the support of vendor, staff, stakeholders like your SRC, consumer advocacy groups. Ensure staff and vendors have skills and tools needed to do the job. We've talked about that in the small groups, and you've heard it in the presentation. Really, that's important to advocate for the needs of your staff, and also for vendors. For example, vendors often don't have enough money for training. So if you have extra training slots for trainings that you're offering that might be important for vendor staff, could you advocate in your agency that those extra slots go to vendors? And using data to make informed decisions. And I think that's been covered pretty well this afternoon. So why don't we go to the next slide, Christy?
Okay, thank you, John. I noticed that we're getting really short on time. So if it's okay with the group, I'm going to expedite through some of this and focus on some things that I think might be more beneficial to you as a tool, as a reference tool. We talked about making data informed decisions with our CMS and the wealth of information that RSA has out there. Use their site. It's pretty awesome. Use the Technical Assistance Center's Robin Hunt and her group. Robin Freeman and her group. Robin Hunt is one of our managers who is also great. but use that. They can help you get the data and make sure that what you're doing is backed up with metrics. We think that if everyone has the skills to do the job, it'll be better. That's just good sense. If we have our budgets together, include all our partners, we can make more informed decisions. And then we're evaluating ourselves on a more global scale. So our next slide talks about some personal opportunities. I really feel like if we're focused, like what I was talking about earlier with QA, you'll make better decisions on the things that have the highest priority. Well, low-hanging fruit, we can leave that for another day. Focus on what really matters. We have a group activity here. It is slotted for 30 minutes. We will not be able to do this today. However, if you'd like to take a look at it and maybe use it with your own staff, it puts you in the perspective of a director and how are you going to handle some things? What are your opportunities? Based on a real issue that VR deals with. With business engagement, there is a survey that we do in Arkansas, and we also use the Career Index Plus. It's really easy to get to Career Index Plus. It's just careerindexplus.com. And it gives you information on jobs that are available, drills all the way down to a particular city. Who uses that here? Anybody? If you don't use it and you want to, careerindexplus.com. Let's see. Somebody uses it. Yeah, they've extended it a little to add apprenticeships, school and program information.
Yes, I'm keeping up with it.
Verification and wage data. It's a pretty great tool if you haven't used it before. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and see if I can share something else with you guys. This is around business satisfaction. Let's see if I can do this. All right, can you see this? One of the measures that isn't quite captured well in the case management system is services to business. And so what we did here in Arkansas was just create an online form that anybody can fill out that will help us capture the contacts and the businesses that we serve and under what type of category. This is something that we have to give to DWS for our measure that's common with them. They actually select which ones we're going to 3, 2. I think I can hear somebody maybe on a phone. You might want to mute yourself. So all we do is a click list. We train them on what this is, and all the counselors can fill this out. They turn it in. We use FormStack. I like it because it goes back to a central location. It creates a report for us. It gives us graphics. It has all these different categories that are the correct categories that you need to capture for business services. I shared the link to you all so you can take a look at it and see if it might be worth your while. I know a lot of states have business engagement teams. We do too, but they are not the only ones providing some of these services. Look at this. Training services, OJT, customized training. Who does that? Counselor. Accessing untapped labor markets. Who does more outreach than anybody? Counselor. So anyway, just something I wanted to share with you for what it's worth. If it's something that can be a useful tool to you, please take it. Here's another one that I wanted to show you. I'll probably have to stop sharing and reshare. Can you see the one that says ARS follow-up survey? John,
Yes.
Joan? Did you say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So this one is to capture all those people that aren't in UI. So if you're not in UI, you don't have the wages, you're not capturing the common measures that you need. Here's a little follow-up survey. Most of you probably already have something like this. We share this with clients at that IPE survey. So we let them know, hey, we're gonna have to ask you for information long after you're gone. This is what it's gonna look like. Just go on the internet, click this link and answer these questions. Are you currently working? Yes, and then it opens it up. So it's got skip logic in it. No, don't think I could handle more than one job at this point. And then you just fill out the answers and it automatically sends it to the state. I didn't fill it out, so it's not going to do right, but it automatically sends it to a central hub and the report goes back to the counselor so that they can enter it into the case management system. So you'll have this link as well if you'd like to use it or adapt it for your use. FormStack's cheap. It can connect to your case management system. And I love that I don't have to use Tableau to make really nice charts and graphs. It automatically does it. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah. Yep, I shared the link, so you have to click the link here in order for this to open and for you to be able to see it. So yeah, I'll make sure that that's on the Google Drive for everybody to access. See if there was anything else. I'm gonna go back to our presentation. We have one last thing that was already sent out, and it's just some best practices around business engagement. So just real quick. And this came from some of those different VR journals that we discussed earlier, those different universities that put it out. I like the idea that it asks you questions so you can go through and decide, what am I really doing? How am I really helping? And what do they need? The biggest takeaway from here for me was I put right here in caps. You have to make the case for why with employers if you want them to take your people. It has to be a win-win situation. Approaching them with some type of job shadowing, some type of unpaid internship, things like that. They got to get to know you a little bit better before they jump off into bigger ask. But if you don't start with the why it's good for them, not why it's good for us, but why it's good for them, you won't get very far. They don't want us coming in and telling them about disabilities before you tell them what you have to offer. So what are the talents and abilities of the people that you bring into them? And we can always talk about disability etiquette. It's real, it's needed. How do you handle assistive technology issues? Sometimes that's a better way to get into the door, just to talk to a business. Hey, do you have a department that handles this? Would you like some information on it? Would you like some presentations and some links to get those types of services? Then you can go in and make the case for why you need to continue the relationship. Prepare job seekers to confidentially present their abilities to prospective, confidently, not confidentially. We've been talking too long. Confidently present who they are. And yes, who they are can include disability if they so choose. But more importantly, why are they a good fit for the job? Always go to that with an employer. They need workers. So if we're not giving them workers, we're not giving them potential workers, then we're not meeting their demand. So we address that gap through business engagement. It's the need, it's the win-win for both of us. Here are those references I mentioned in the toolkits through explorevr.org. They're great. Take a look at them if you want to improve your VR processes around business engagement. So additionally, here's some performance measurement tools and processes for you that I think we may have already covered some of this, and internal controls. But that's for you at your leisure. This was a long presentation, John. I think that we may need to do another one. What do you think?
Why don't we put that question to the chat box?
Okay.
That's a good question. Let's get the answers.
Whoops. This was a lot of material to cover. And we also wanted to make sure that you had adequate time to talk with your smaller group teams to flesh out those points. So if you do want more of this, more detailed of this, we can discuss that. And we definitely are going to make sure that you have copies of everything that we sent.
That's great. I have been seeing some of the comments. A few people had to get off a little early, and they were saying they've taken tons of notes and a lot of great information. So it was information rich. So thank you, John and Christy, for this session. It really has been a really good, informative training. Thank you both. Any final comments from anyone? Speaking of feedback, I will send out an evaluation link this afternoon. So please fill out the evaluation. When you complete the evaluation, don't close the window. What you want to do is kind of scroll back up to the top of the screen and look at, click on the link that says My Registrations. And from there, it should kind of lead you to be able to download the CRC certificate. And those are for general hours, not ethics. But if you didn't get the CRC certificate from the previous sessions, let me know. I'll send the evaluation link. We do ask you to complete the evaluation before you're able to download the CRC certificate. So I'll be sure and send that out. I could have very well have overlooked sending out the evaluation from last time. If I did, I apologize. So you may get 2 links today, one from last month and one for this month. Any questions? Was everyone okay? I did hear from Susan and Veronica's group. Was everyone okay with switching to June 29th?